wonderful music today. Thank you so much. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm all right. Thank you for asking. There's a place in Kentucky called the Monastery of Gethsemane. And a lot of people that I know, and I've been there at times when I was in seminary, would go there and observe the hours. And the observance of the hours are we wake up to eat breakfast, most of us, or we wake up because we have to go to work or something like that. But at Gethsemane, in the observance of the hours, they get up to pray. And then they go back to bed and maybe sleep another hour or so. They get up for early morning prayers. So you don't necessarily go to bed to sleep straight through. You observe the hours of the day. However, I know from most United Methodist churches that you observe the hours, and one of the sacred hours is 12 o'clock noon on Sunday. So I'm going to give you permission, if you become nervous or anxious at 12 o'clock, it's okay to leave. We love you. I promise you, you won't offend me. But if you would like to stay and hear a little bit more about Pentecost, we probably will go over. Right now it's 7 minutes till or 6 minutes till, and so we're probably going to go a little past 12 o'clock today. So just relax and stay with me. The day of Pentecost came 50 days after Passover, and the last day of Passover was the day when Jesus was crucified. What happened at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the day of Pentecost, or at sundown that day, was the festival of first fruits began. So the festival of first fruits will again be observed at the end of the festival of Shavuot, or what we call Pentecost, the 7 weeks after Passover, or the 50 days after Passover. So what does it mean? What's the significance of that? Well, Jesus is the first fruits of those who have died. And so there's a coordination there. He's not just the Passover lamb who is crucified, but he is the Lord who rose from the dead as the first fruits. And on the day of Pentecost, they're going to cook the bread with leaven, with yeast, from that grain that was offered to God on the last day of Passover and what is the beginning of Shavuot, or the Festival of Weeks and First Fruits. If you're Jewish, you go to Jerusalem in that day to temple to observe Shavuot, just like you do Passover. It is required. If you're able, you live within a certain distance. And if you read Acts chapter 2, you're going to read about people from all over the known world, from as far away as Egypt and the Nile River, from as far away as Rome, Jews and proselytes to Judaism. And the people that it's talking about in Acts 2 are all Jews. I want you to get that in your mind, because it's not yet time in the book of Acts to convert the Gentiles. First, the Jews who have the book and the promise have to come to know who the Messiah is, who the truth is. Now, it's a terrible time for the disciples of Jesus leading up to this. It's a wonderful time, but it's a terrible time. The first thing we know from Luke, who also wrote Acts, is that they were terrified. They were scared to death, and even Jesus showing up after he'd been dead scared them to death. Reminds me of the kid who had just moved into a new home, a little girl, and her daddy went down to say prayers with her that night and said, "Now go to sleep, honey." And he was so tired that he went back, and he and his wife and sat down. And a few minutes later, she came down. It was a new house, and she was nervous. They just moved in. And she said, "Daddy, I'm scared." So he went back, and he put her to bed again. They said their prayers, and he said, "The Lord is with you." And she said, "Okay." And so she came back a few minutes later, just as he was trying to relax and he was frustrated. He said, "Honey, You go back down to that room because the Lord is with you, and you know that. And she went down to the room and stood outside the door, and he watched her, and she stood outside the door for a long time, and she said, "Oh, Lord, if you were really with me in this room, would you please not say anything because you would just scare me to death." Now, I want to tell you, that's the way the disciples felt when Jesus showed up. And we forget that. They weren't hip, hip, hooray about the resurrection. They didn't put on their best and get dressed up for Easter. They were terrified. And they had to get over that. And so they've got this 50-day period where Jesus keeps showing up. Isn't that amazing? He keeps showing up, and different ones of the disciples see Jesus, and they go tell each other about it. And finally, they get it. They wait in Jerusalem like he told them, and they stay together in Jerusalem, and they're praying in a house. Now, we imagine that they're in the upper room, and they're praying in this house where they had communion, the Last Supper, and that they are in that room. Well, I don't know where we get that. It just says they're in a house. And the houses there had rooms that go up, but they also had courtyards where the extended family would meet. My guess is they were in the courtyard because there are a lot of people that can hear them outside. And there are a lot of people that know what's going on, so they look over that little low fence and they say, "Oh, what's the matter with those people?" Because they're over there and they're speaking in languages. And everybody from Cappadocia to Rome can understand them. All these Jews who are living all over the world who are hearing them speak in their own dialect. And they say, "Aren't all these people from the Galilee? You know, a bunch of rednecks from Mississippi. Well, aren't they all from the Galilee? What's the deal? What are they doing over there? They're from the Galilee." And we understand what they're saying. And somebody says, "Yeah, they're drunk." That's what the problem is. They're intoxicated. Look at them. They're full of new wine, you know? And so Peter hears that. And he gets up and he says, people, it's not like what you think. There's something going on here, and it's really gotten to us, but it's not what you think. It's too early to be drunk. And then he tells them what's really going on. Now, I want to pull 2 or 3 things together with you on this because I think they're vital to our understanding of the scripture. In the first place, when you look at the early passages in the scripture, the festival of Shavuot, of Pentecost, has fully arrived. They're all together in one place. And then what's the first thing that happens? If you're looking at Acts 2, you see they hear a sound like a violent wind. What do you do when you hear the tornado coming? Head for the closet or the bathroom or somewhere, you know, unless you have a basement. If you're lucky enough in Mississippi to have one in our red clay, you don't want to be in it necessarily. But you head for a place that you think is secure, but they don't, because it is a sound and it echoes all the way back to creation. When God created humans, the word Adam, in Hebrew means human, male and female. Genesis 1 tells us that. The word for man is Ish. And in chapter 2, even though Isha, the woman, is going to be created from Ish, the man, that word is not used till the end of the chapter. In the beginning, the word that's used is Adam. And God forms the man from the clay of the earth and the woman from the clay of the earth. Now I know they're still together. They're one creature together. But humanity is created by God from the clay. And then something miraculous happens. Something different. Something that is not what happens in the rest of creation. God gets down and dirty with humanity. Why should it surprise us so much that Jesus comes to earth, God in the flesh? God's been getting down here with us since the beginning. God breathes into the human the breath of life. And I'm going to tell you, it's not like that. I mean, it's CPR. If you're going to give me CPR, get out and dirty, okay? You hear me? Don't stand up there and look at me and I don't need that. God breathed into humanity the breath of life. That means that our real life comes from God's own being. God gives God's own breath. The word is ruach. Ruach. Can you say that? Ruach. Yeah, don't breathe in when you say it. It's kind of dangerous. It's breathe out. Ruach. You feel the air come out? Ruach. What happens next is that there are tongues all stuck together like tongues of fire, and then they separate suddenly, and they move to each one of these disciples. And where does that come from? Well, we could say it comes from Isaiah chapter 6, when he's sitting there and he says, "Woe is me, I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips. I live in a people of unclean lips." And so God sends a seraphim with a coal from the altar and puts it on his tongue and cleanses his tongue. It's more basic to Judaism than that. It's older than Isaiah. It goes back to the beginning of what are called the Psalms of Ascent. And the 120th Psalm, which is what you sing, the first thing that you sing. You know, looking at this altar, this order of worship, it's really a good order of worship. And you've got an opening word, an opening prayer. Do you know what an opening is? What's it supposed to do? Talk to me a little bit. It does what? Yeah, it goes through, and what's its purpose? It gets us what? Prepared. It kind of helps get us into the spirit or the mood. And Psalm 120 is to get you ready to do what you're going to do when you get to temple, when you're going up to Jerusalem. Ascent means to go up. And that's what every Psalm of Ascent, maybe you've seen that and wondered about it, it's what you sing when you're going to Jerusalem. And so here they are going up to Jerusalem, and the first psalm that you sing talks about your problem with your lips. And it says, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips and a deceitful tongue." Wow. You ever read the book of Revelation? You know who doesn't get into the kingdom? Those who live in deceit. We've had that problem since the serpent deceived Eve. Our problem is that we deceive ourselves. Oh, it doesn't get any better than this. You ever heard that? I mean, there were commercials with that. And, you know, the first commercial I remember is a bunch of guys sitting around a fire drinking beer. It doesn't get any better than this. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding. I mean, there were mosquitoes on that river when I was down there. And there was bugs all around, and we had to kill a snake or two to get them out of the camp, and then you didn't sleep too well if you killed one big enough. No, it doesn't get any better than this. That's the deceit. For you see, in the book of Revelation, the angels of the 12 gates are given the opposite charge of the angel at the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve lose their place in the garden, the angel guards the gate to keep anybody from coming in. In the book of Revelation, the angels, the 12 angels, guard the 12 gates to keep them open so that whoever will may come in. And the only ones ultimately that get shut out are those that deceive themselves. Deliver me, O God, from my deceptive tongue that even lies to me. So God sends tongues of fire, and these fearful, weak-minded, apprehensive disciples suddenly took on something of power. The breath of God, the life of God, the fire from God. And they said, we got a story to tell. And they start preaching. The oldest church in the world today, the oldest continuously worshiping congregation in the world, is in a place called Cappadocia in Turkey. It's in a cave. They still meet there. Man. They are mentioned in the book of Acts in chapter 2. A few years ago, when all the stuff was going on in Syria, and we don't understand a lot of that stuff. To be quite honest, we get it all confused. And we make decisions we don't need to make. And a well-meaning reporter stepped up and he asked one of the people who were Christians. And he looked at the Syrian and he said, just when were your people converted to Christianity? And the Syrian pastor looked at him and smiled, and he said, about 2,000 years ago. You see, long before there were Muslims in Syria, there were Christians. Long before, because from the book of Acts, people from Syria were converted to Christianity. We forget. Arabs were converted to Christianity in Acts chapter 2. People from all over that region of the world were converted to Christianity. So who did we go in as Americans and arm? The rebels who were threatening the Christians. Sometimes we don't get it right. And it's very frustrating. We need to pray for our brothers and sisters who are yet in the world. There's a story of a Syrian pastor who was caught by one of the rebels who said, you can convert to Islam or you can die. This was early on in the Syrian conflict. And the pastor looked at him and he said, then you can shoot me, because I have trusted Jesus all my life and I will trust him now. And so the soldier took his rifle and put it up to his head and pulled the trigger and it misfired. And he ejected the cartridge and put another one in and he pulled the trigger again and it misfired. And the pastor had said to him, if you shoot me today, I will be with my Lord in heaven. And the third time the soldier put his gun to his head and pulled the trigger and it misfired. And the soldier said, get up and run. Your Lord doesn't want you in heaven today. The day of Pentecost undoes one of the problems that we have in the world today. And that is a problem of misunderstanding, of mistrust, of judging one another. It was like the Tower of Babel when they thought they could accomplish anything but not with God, but as gods. And they built a tower to the heavens. And God said, this is not going to work. And God confounded their speech. And they were dispersed throughout the earth. And then on the day of Pentecost, they're brought back together in unity. Not by power, not by our ability to build towers, whether it's the tallest one in the world or not, but by the Spirit of the living God. Where's your strength? I can tell you, if you think it's in your physical body, you live long enough, you get old enough, you're going to lose that. Where's your strength? I can tell you, if you put your strength in the economy, it's proved more than once that it can fall. And people can lose their way in what they have. Where's your strength? Even ideologies fail. So if your philosophy is one that you think can sustain you in life, it won't. At some point in time, it will fail you. Where is your strength? If you think it's in the power of the military, keep putting more and more money into it and spreading troops around the world. Sooner or later, the world will overwhelm us or be destroyed in the process. Where is your strength? Ruah. And there was a sound like a rushing, mighty wind. Ruah, the breath that God breathed into us, the presence of Christ within us, the Holy Spirit who comes upon us, the one who said, I will be with you always. When Moses said to God, how will I do it? How will I go? God said, I am with you. Where is your strength? I am with you. Mary was 31 years old when I met her. She wasn't a member of my church. Her name was Bonnie, actually. Her friend Mary wanted me to go see her. They were both 31. They were high school classmates. And Mary said, Sam, I really want you to meet my friend Bonnie. I said, why, Mary? Doesn't she have a pastor? She lives in another city. No, I want her to meet you. So one Thursday morning, I thought, well, I'll call her bluff. It's late. It's 8:20. I said, Mary, I can go, but I need to go now. I need to be back. And lo and behold, she said, okay. And she showed up, and we went. And I was pouting about having to go to another city to see somebody else's church member. And Mary said, Bonnie has MS, Sam. And we've known each other since we were kids. We were wild teenagers together. So we get there and we find Bonnie, and she can't feed herself. She can no longer move from one place to another. She has to be assisted to go to the bathroom, to eat. And she can barely talk. But something happened to me in that room, and I realized that Mary wasn't taking me for Bonnie. She was taking me for me. I watched these two old high school chums. At one point, Mary helped Bonnie floss her teeth. Now, this wasn't normal dental flossing. This was like rolling out this 5 feet long dental floss, grabbing Bonnie's hand, wrapping the dental floss around, and swinging her back and forth while these two chums flossed each other's teeth. And Bonnie said, I love for Mary to come. I didn't want to leave. Mary said, Sam, I've got to go. I've got to pick up my kids from school. I thought it would be me the one saying, let's go. I didn't want to leave. And Bonnie said, I said to Bonnie, I want to pray for you before we go. And she said to me, I want you to pray, but not till I tell you something. Now I'm talking, she's struggling to talk, but I'm telling you what she said. And she looked at me and she said, Sam, before I had MS, I didn't know Jesus. I found Jesus after I got MS. And Sam, I would rather have MS and know Jesus than be well without him. Where is our strength?